Can the wrongs of transatlantic slavery be righted through reparations? How does this question unfold in the conservative and liberal dialogue? The reparations debate is a complex and heated one, firmly rooted in the scars of history and the transatlantic slave trade. To put things into perspective, the transatlantic slave trade was a horrific period that spanned over 4 centuries, during which millions of Africans were forcibly transported to the Americas and the Caribbean to work as slaves. The effects of this appalling chapter in human history continue to ripple through generations, shaping social, economic, and cultural landscapes. The question of reparations for this historical injustice is a contentious one, sparking a whirlwind of opinions and emotions. Some argue that reparations can provide a form of justice for the descendants of those who were enslaved, helping to redress the long-lasting impacts of slavery. Others, however, view reparations as a problematic solution, questioning the feasibility and fairness of assigning financial liability for wrongs committed in the past. This issue isn't just a socio-economic debate, it's deeply political, with conservatives and liberals often being at odds. The conservative perspective tends to question the practicality and moral grounds of reparations, while liberals generally advocate for them as a means to rectify systemic racial disparities. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're here to unpack this complex issue, not to pass judgment or take sides. Our goal is to shed light on the various perspectives in this ongoing debate, to help us all better understand the different arguments and where they come from. Before we delve into this, remember, this is a complex issue with no simple solutions. However, understanding the different perspectives can help us navigate the conversation. So, whether you're a conservative, a liberal, or somewhere in between, we invite you to join us on this exploratory journey. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the conservative and liberal views on the reparations debate. What do conservatives generally believe when it comes to reparations for transatlantic slavery? This is a question often met with a variety of responses, but a common thread is woven through the conservative perspective on this issue. From a conservative standpoint, reparations for transatlantic slavery present several challenging complexities. One such challenge lies in accurately determining how much is owed. It's a monumental task with countless variables, including the duration of slavery, the number of individuals affected, and the economic gains reaped from their labor. How do we fairly calculate these sums? And once calculated, how do we distribute these reparations? These questions pose significant logistical challenges. Furthermore, there is a widely held belief among conservatives that the current generation cannot be held accountable for the actions of their ancestors. This viewpoint argues that it's unjust to hold individuals financially responsible for deeds they did not commit. Moreover, it raises the question of who exactly should pay. Should it be the governments of countries involved in the transatlantic slave trade, or should it be the descendants of those who profited directly from it? These are complex moral and ethical questions that further complicate the issue. Finally, there's a concern that reparations could potentially create more division than unity. The fear is that by opening old wounds and highlighting historical injustices, we could end up stoking the fires of resentment and division. This could potentially lead to an us versus them mentality that hinders the progress of social unity and cohesion. It's important to note that these viewpoints don't represent all conservatives. The conservative perspective is as diverse as the individuals who identify with it. However, these arguments do reflect some of the common themes within conservative discourse on the topic of reparations. While these viewpoints may vary, the conservative stance often centers around practicality and concerns about the potential consequences of reparations. This perspective emphasizes the need for pragmatic solutions that address the complexities of the issue, while also considering the broader societal implications. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at the liberal perspective on reparations. In stark contrast to the conservative viewpoint, the liberal perspective often champions the concept of reparations. But why is that? Well, there are several reasons liberals often cite when arguing in favor of reparations. Firstly, they point to the ongoing socioeconomic disparities that have their roots in slavery. They argue that the inequalities we see today in wealth, education, and opportunities are not accidental but are instead the direct result of centuries of systemic racism and discrimination. This perspective contends that society has a responsibility to rectify these disparities, and reparations are seen as a means to do so. Secondly, liberals often discuss the concept of inherited wealth and disadvantage. The argument goes that while some families have been able to accumulate wealth over generations, others have been systematically denied this opportunity. This is not about individual guilt or innocence, but rather about acknowledging and addressing historical injustices. Thirdly, the belief in reparations as a form of justice and reconciliation is a key aspect of the liberal viewpoint. This perspective sees reparations not just as a financial transaction, but as a symbolic act of recognition, apology, and healing. It's about acknowledging the wrongs of the past and taking tangible steps to make amends. Of course, the liberal viewpoint is not universally embraced, even within the liberal community. There are differing opinions on how reparations should be implemented, who should receive them, and what form they should take. Some argue for direct payments to descendants of slaves, while others advocate for investments in communities disproportionately affected by slavery and its aftermath. However, despite these differences, there is a common thread that runs through the liberal perspective on reparations. It's a belief in the power and necessity of acknowledging historical injustices and taking concrete steps to address them. It's about moving towards a more equitable and just society. The liberal viewpoint often emphasizes the moral and social justice aspects of reparations, acknowledging the long-term effects of slavery. So, how much do countries potentially owe in reparations, and why have they generally refused to pay? It's a loaded question with no straightforward answer. Some estimates put the figure in the trillions of dollars, reflecting centuries of unpaid labor and systemic discrimination. However, these figures are often disputed, with critics arguing that it's nearly impossible to calculate a precise amount due to the complex and multifaceted nature of historical injustice. Why then, despite these staggering estimates, have nations generally refused to pay reparations? The reasons are as varied as they are complex. For starters, there's the political unwillingness. Many governments, particularly those with conservative leanings, argue against reparations on the grounds that they would unfairly burden present generations for the sins of their ancestors. They assert that today's citizens should not be held accountable for historical wrongs they did not personally commit. Then, there's the fear of setting a precedent. If reparations are paid for transatlantic slavery, some ask, where does it end? Would nations then be compelled to pay reparations for other historical injustices, such as colonialism or wars? The potential implication of this precedent is something many countries are wary of. Lastly, there are the economic constraints. Even if a country wanted to pay reparations, the sheer scale of these projected figures could be financially crippling. For many nations, this is an insurmountable hurdle, especially when faced with other pressing social and economic challenges. But it's not all about money. Reparations also involve acknowledgement and education about the historical injustices and their long-lasting effects. They involve a commitment to rectify systemic inequalities and to ensure that such injustices do not repeat. The debate around reparations is far from settled, with many barriers standing in the way of any potential resolution. Yet, it's a conversation that continues to resonate in our collective conscience, challenging us to confront our past and shape a more equitable future. What are some suggested ways to resolve the issue of reparations for transatlantic slavery? This question has stirred debates far and wide. While the conversation often revolves around monetary compensation, it's worth exploring other avenues that can lead to a more lasting resolution. One such proposition is the creation of targeted social programs. These initiatives could be designed to benefit communities that have been disproportionately affected by the historical legacy of slavery. By focusing on areas such as healthcare, housing, and employment, we can begin to address the underlying socioeconomic disparities that persist today. Education is another key area to consider. Implementing curriculum changes can help ensure that future generations are better informed about the history and impacts of transatlantic slavery. This approach isn't about assigning blame or guilt, but rather fostering a deeper understanding and empathy. It's about teaching our young people that history is not just a series of events, but a complex tapestry that still influences the world we live in today. Economic investments in affected communities also hold potential. By directing resources toward infrastructure development, business grants, and job creation, we can stimulate economic growth and provide opportunities for upward mobility. This approach recognizes that the effects of slavery are not confined to the past, but continue to manifest in present-day economic disparities. Moreover, fostering open and respectful dialogue is crucial. Conversations about reparations can be difficult and uncomfortable, but they are necessary. It's through these discussions that we can begin to bridge the divide, promote understanding, and work towards reconciliation. Each of these solutions attempts to address the ongoing effects of slavery, rather than the historical act itself. They focus on healing and progress, rather than retribution. They challenge us to confront the past, but also to envision a future where the wounds of history can finally begin to heal. While the conversation around reparations continues, it's important to remember that any potential solution should aim to promote understanding, reconciliation, and progress.